Welcome to My Rules Are Better. I'm Tom Barbalet. I wanted to say I actually listened to Barney Dicker's podcast in entirety, and it made me think very strongly about open source and releasing rules open source after all this time, because certainly Barney was very decisive in talking about rules that he physically held in his hands, but not rules that I had released open source on a website where people would actually need to go there. And I've decided against putting the rules and the novella into the podcast feed because I have the power to do that. I could just add the PDFs into the podcast feed to enable everyone who gets this podcast to get that stuff as well. That seems kind of counterproductive to me. I would like people to actually go to a website, type it in, download it from there, pursue it accordingly. Maybe I'm wasting my time here. barbalet@gmail.com. Bravo, Alpha Romeo, Bravo, Alpha Lima, Echo Tango @gmail.com if you want to get in contact with me and tell me otherwise. So, what is needed for folks to actually talk about a rule set? Is it just foolish to release a rule set open source and hope through some hope and means that people will actively download it? This is what I'm wondering here. It certainly was interesting listening to Barney's podcast because he's kind of taken some time off from his podcast, but he was doing a lot of fun stuff, doing a lot of engagement, actually meeting up, I think at least, maybe, potentially with other folks that are in the small group that we gathered together periodically and on Discord now, very rarely associated with talking about Barney's rule set. I was thinking maybe I need to actually record a podcast with Barney in the foreseeable future just as a means to air out some, not even dirty laundry, just dry out some laundry that's out there and give him an opportunity to ask me questions, give me an opportunity to ask him questions. But I don't know where Barney's at with that stuff. So it was kind of a strange podcast to listen and think, well, it'd be good to engage. Well, what format of engagement do I need to do? And I think specifically for me, open source, putting stuff online free of charge, nominally easily accessible if people could actually interact with it or find it in some way. I mean, you're not just randomly going to type in justplainchaos.com, and you're certainly not going to use any of the relevant search engines to find anything associated with my work, because that's all been expunged long ago, many years ago. So long ago now that it doesn't even bear mentioning in public this kind of discourse, because quite frankly, the only way you'll find the Just Plain Chaos rules is if you go to justplainchaos.com and download them for yourself. Or alternatively, be like Shay, download the fiction, complain about the fiction. The fiction is there to be complained about after all. That's why I put all this stuff online. But I was thinking, do I need to actually put this in a paper version? And I was thinking this in specifically with regards to the Chechen rules, which have laboured recently. You'll hear in my other podcast, Long Funk, if you listen to it, that I'm spending more time dealing with sleep as in the winter months, which tends to be the case, that I sleep extra in the winter months and make up for it in the productivity of the warmer months. Let's just call them what they are. And I think that's probably the case here. And the Chechen rules leave me feel a little unsettled because basically there's nothing positive that came out of Chechnya at all. And the whole notion, as I floated in the last podcast recording, that the Chechens are now just the Australians in the Russian army, left me paused for thought. Like, why, once again, are you diving boots and all into a topic that you don't really have any business being a part of, Tom? That's what I say to myself. That's what I say to myself, even in podcast form. Why am I doing this thing if it's not going to, add anything? And it's interesting because of certainly the specific stuff in the original Just Plain Chaos rules that details why there won't be any Second World War attribution. And Chechnya, to me, strikes me as even more Second World War than the prescribed podcast, the prescribed book that I've been talking about writing. But give me time, give me energy, give me direction, none of which I have currently, and I should be able to furnish what will be potentially something that will put together with the old writing and maybe even the old novella into a piece that you could actually hold in your hand and maybe worthy of mentioning in Barney Dicker's podcast, by Barney Dicker himself, in fact, because it would be a physical thing as opposed to something you just have to download and hear about in podcast form. So don't hold your breath with regards to China coming out. But somewhere in the distinct future, when the buildings are rendering a little bit better in my open source software and, I'm feeling generally more clued in with regards to writing something like that. I've already written the draft in my head associated with the introduction of various piecemeal components of it, because really what you have to prescribe here is a fantasy land based very, very loosely on simple matters of fact. I found this recently. I was watching a show on Netflix, of all things, called Hostages, and the hostage situation that dealt with Chechnya specifically was so disturbed and unrelenting and just generally disturbed. And I thought, why would this be something that would be in your future, Tom, writing about this particular thing? It's all very paradoxical and very strange, which in some part was like my relationship with the Second World War potential of writing rules for, whatever you call them, partisans escaping through the Second World War. Anyway, if you actually download the Just Plain Chaos rules, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't, you probably won't. Also, if you want to subscribe to Long Funk, I do talk a little bit about Just Plain Chaos the writing in this week's Long Funk recording, which I'm putting out as an actual numbered recording. And hopefully with this one I might put out as a numbered recording too, because I need to start doing that on occasion. Or I need to find an RSS publisher that's free that I can put online and just publish the RSS feed explicitly on the front page of this particular podcast recording. Tom Barbley in Las Vegas, Nevada, signing out.